everybody, welcome to the show. I am joined today by two giants in the comic book horror genre and beyond. We've got Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees creator Patrick Horvath, and of course, Scott Snyder, creator of everything, including the dungeon from Dark Spaces at IDW. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a nice opportunity to get to meet you too, Patrick.
Yes, likewise. It's
such an isolating
thing.
But it's really nice to meet you, Patrick.
Yeah, likewise, man.
Yeah, I love that both of you have such a unique perspective and such unique stories from the same publisher. You're both telling stories about serial killers, but from completely different vantage points. And I wanted to talk about like where those come from and maybe kind of see some kind of cross-pollination between the two of you guys as well. Scott, I guess we'll start with you. When it comes to Dark Spaces, the dungeon, we're wrapping up.
Yeah,
and
we are.
Yeah.
And it's a series. I mean, I love it. Like, you know, I didn't realize how much I would enjoy having a space to be this twisted in the real world. Like, I have a lot of sort of creative spaces where I get to do like monsters and, you know, all kinds of cosmic horror or, you know, supernatural horror, ghosts and goblins and all that kind of stuff. And Dark Spaces has become the place where I get to go and do sort of real psychological, grounded, sort of claustrophobic stories. And I haven't done a horror story in that space really since the very beginning of my career, honestly, where I did a book called Severed. So to be able to do that here, I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. So I'm going to miss it a lot when it's gone. It's got like it, but it's definitely, it's been also like such a tour of like an incredibly grim psychology. So it will be a relief as well.
Do you find when you explore the space that kind of excises that part? Because I can imagine, you know, at any given point, living in American society, there's a cloud of gloom over us at any point. But do you find that you can channel some of that, and when you excise it through Dark Spaces, you're like, like I did it. I lived my gloominess, or I took my like kind of negative space and channeled it into my work, and now I can kind of look on something more positive.
Well, it's always awkward when you're like thinking about a story like that and you're at your kid's soccer game or whatever, and or this or that. And especially if you like Google it, you're like Googling it while, you know, and it's like
sure.
waiting for the authorities to arrive at any minute.
Yep.
But I think, you know, and it speaks to what I love about Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees as well. When I getting to do horror, and horror is, you know, it's like my favorite genre. It's like home. It gives you a place to explore your anxieties and the things you're really afraid of in this kind of safe with these guardrails on. And so it does give you a chance, if not to excise things, then at least to really explore them in a deep way. And what I love about Dungeon is that it is sort of like a Alex Cross, Clarice Starling kind of serial killer thriller. But what it's really about in a lot of ways is emotionally, it's about somebody who believes that they've kind of escaped this person's clutches by getting out of this dungeon that was supposed to hold them their whole life. And instead finds themselves unable to escape emotionally, intellectually, any of it. And they're obsessed with it. And on a different level, like what Dark Spaces has given me a chance to do with Wildfire and now with Dungeon is to try and do genre stuff, but make stories that feel like they touch on what I think is in the zeitgeist, even if I'm wrong. So Wildfire, you know, it's a noir set against these kind of endless apocalyptic wildfires in the California hills. And here it's about a serial killer who believes himself to be kind of the next evolution of evil, because instead of just attacking people or killing them out of impulse, he likes to manipulate and control their entire lives inside of these horrifying dungeons. And, you know, what his thinking is that that's kind of what a paradigm of predatory evil would do in a society that's all about control, manipulation, connectivity, all of that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It gives me a chance to explore, the things that are on my mind in all kinds of ways. And what I like most about, or one of the things I like so much about Patrick's book is how it feels similar, where the anthropomorphic animals, like, you would never expect to ever be that dark. And then when you get to that first murder, and spoiler, but like in issue 1 with the duck, and it's like so violent, and you see that, like, literally like a bisected head with the brain and all of this stuff. It feels like that it resonates on a different level, as strange as it sounds, because you're seeing things that are these avatars of innocence, and yet they're being so hyper violent, and they're so much like us that it feels like it's speaking to a kind of an anger or a fear, in a way that it feels there's an energy on the page to that.
Absolutely. And it's funny, you keyed into something about claustrophobia, and immediately my mind went to Beneath the Trees with Woodbrook, and this kind of like intimate setting with the small town atmosphere. Patrick, where did the decision to set it in Woodbrook and create this kind of like cute Americana idyllic scene and set it against the horror, like where did that come from?
I think it was probably like a combination of the sort of Richard Scarry children's books. That was a big inspiration when I was kind of fleshing out like what this world would be. And he has Busy Town, if you're not familiar with the Richard Scarry books. And so I was like, well, this would be like a busy town. And then I also sort of laid over that the in my mind anyway, of sort of a David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
Oh,
Sure.
Riverton, sort of, making it like the idyllic, but obviously like there's so much dark stuff underneath that you could dip into. And then it was just it was like a mashup of those two. And then I really wanted it to feel, protected in a way. Also, of like a lot of the townspeople, that they had been sort of sheltered for anybody who had never like really left. So that all of this stuff, kind of in a busy town sort of way, like it would just, to have like murder in Busy Town with the idea of like, how much would that shake up things? Because I really wanted to have the impact felt. So much so that it starts kind of unraveling the town a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And to have that, like, they just can't even process it in so many of them, that it's, it's such a problem.
Yeah, I noticed when reading the first 3 issues, which I was able to shotgun, by the way, which is awesome. And I understand you thought of approaching this whole series as an original graphic novel originally. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's just how I pitched it. I think when I was first talking with Mark Doyle at IDW, he'd mentioned, send us some pitches for like a graphic novel or something, and we'll see what's up. And so that was just my idea. I broke it up into chapters as I was writing it, and when I sort of the response to it, though, when I was talking with Maggie Howell, was sort of like, oh, this is going to be great. Like the issue 1's great, issue 2's great, and it was blah blah. And I was like, oh, I thought they'd be chapters, but I'm totally happy to do, singles. That'd be amazing. And so that's just kind of how it happened.
I've noticed that it's actually not. It's a wonderful device because it forces me to turn the page. It forces me to go to the next one. I found that obviously by the end of issue 1, you have to know what happens to the next one. But
sure,
there is like an act break. There is a built-in break at the end of each issue to have you go, well, I gotta read the next. I have to pick up the next copy. Both of you guys have experience now working, obviously, with the development of Beneath the Trees as kind of an original graphic novel, but then breaking it into individual issues. And Scott, with your experience writing stories that are collected in original graphic novels, do you guys seem to have a preference? Like, do you like to write it in terms of like a bulk, or do you like the kind of surprise element of, I'm writing a single issue, I have some time between issues, I kind of like to be kind of challenged and go, what's going to happen? I don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the next one.
That's a great question. I mean, they're just really different muscles for me, honestly. Like doing something that's sort of one long form story, I probably have the muscle memory like so burned into me at this point that I do the like sequential breaks within it.
Sure.
But knowing that it has to be presented that way, and that the story itself has that sort of specific kind of causality where like each issue really leads you to the next issue, and they're a unit and each thing has a shape and has its own kind of circularity and all of that stuff. I mean, I love it. So I don't know if I prefer one or the other. I mean, right now, because I'm doing a lot of, I'm doing sequential comics, like I miss having the big, like rolly space of like a graphic novel or something to work on where there aren't chapter breaks.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're really different muscles, honestly, for me. And I enjoy both.
That's fair. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I feel like it's I don't know if I could ever put together something where I didn't know what the whole thing was gonna be, just because I've never had that opportunity. And then it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm so bad at coming up with stuff, and like, and then I don't know, this is like sort of jazzy, like where am I going with this?
I'm like that too. Like,
I'm so bad. I have to look at the whole roadmap and then be like, okay, yeah, and this will be that. And
how much do you know, just out of curiosity? So like going into it, and when we're off the air, I'm like torn between like wanting to know what happens I read 4 in 5 and 6, and just reading it for myself. If you have them and you send them, I will read them like right today. But I'm curious because I'm like fascinated by people's processes. I have some friends that it's like a complete inversion of what you and I sound like we do, where if I have one friend, if he knows the ending of the story, it's like boring to him. So he has to
fun. That's totally interesting.
And to be fair, he's writing books, not comics, so he can find it and then go back and edit it.
Oh, sure.
But that said, like for me, I can't start unless I know like I have like the first few big beats. I know where I'm headed at the end in terms of what it's about, like what I'm trying to say with it. And then some of the turns in the middle, like some of the big kind of character and emotional stuff. And then once I start to have that shape, then I can at least dive in and start, if not writing, then at least kind of outlining more. But I need like those signposts or kind of anchor points.
100%. I absolutely need them. I find that I've written whole screenplays where I got to the end and I was like, meh. Because I didn't know what I was doing. I was literally just like, and then this will happen and whatever. And I got to the whole thing and I was just kind of like, eh. Like I didn't care. There was nothing really satisfying about it. I sort of like basically had like painted myself into this corner of like, it's a conclusion, but it's not really satisfying. What the hell am I saying with this? Like when like, and then there were so many moments where I was stuck, and I just hated that and liked that. So I realized that if I had those little signposts throughout all the way to the end, then I would always have the thing I'm aiming for. But there's still totally like discovery.
Yeah.
Like the whole issue 3 of this was a total, like that issue wasn't in
with the
outline.
cat, really? Yeah.
And that was it was a beat because I wanted a red herring beat, but I didn't know that I did honestly, because it was 5. It was like 5 chapters. And then they were like, Maggie was like, hey, so I think I would love to pitch doing 6. And then because I feel like it would give it a little more room to breathe. And then I was allowed to expand into issue 3, which to me is like a totally interesting issue. That dives into yeah. And it very much gets into this interesting space of like grief. And how that plays out amongst people, and also how the killer fits into it. And I was just, oh God, I pulled my thing off. Anyway, so I was like, oh my God, this is like a great opportunity to, there's a great opportunity to just, sit in that.
It was super suspenseful too, because without giving spoilers, like you're not sure what's going to happen to Samantha. Like I didn't know. Right. I didn't know. There are just great moments there where you're like, is she caught, or is she going to lash out, or what? So it was wonderful.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But yeah, I definitely, there's still those moments to find, even in the process of laying it all out, which I love. But it's
that's the joy.
If I don't know where I'm going, it could just be a waste of time, though, man.
Yeah, I've been there, believe me. Like, but I think it's one of the things that like comics, because they do come out behind you, and like you generally like I can't think of a time like I've written 6 full issues. Or, you know, most arcs just 3 issues, 6 issues, whatever, but most like 5 to 6 issues. Like I can't really think of a time I've had the chance to write all of that ahead of issue 1 being locked, at least like locked down. So it's always this kind of feeling of it kind of coming behind you, and it's good because it makes you, at least me, like I feel like I would refine things until they just became like a potato and meant nothing, you know?
Right.
And so having to let go of it and like just have it begin is good. But it is also like, you know, that's why I feel like, just like you're saying, Patrick, it's like I need to at least see the thing I'm pointing towards to be able to, you know, so I don't kind of go off the rails and then have it all catch me and be like, oh no.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You guys talked about, and Patrick, your example of like having an opportunity to expand your narrative, and it actually ended up improving your story, and it changed the entire kind of like structure of your story, because without the cat element, you don't have that kind of like red herring twist in your in your act. Scott, do you have any other examples of where you got an opportunity to expand your narrative and it completely changed your story from pitch to execution? Something where you're like,
oh yeah, sure. I mean, almost everyone has those moments, you know. In Dungeon, I think it really was like the ending was really locked from the very beginning. We discussed it a lot. So like the end of issue 4 through issue 5 was always going to be there. And then 1 to 2, I kind of knew, but a lot of 3 and 4 were sort of figuring out what made the most sense. And one of my favorite conversation, if 4 has like one of my favorite moments in the whole thing where, Bodhi and Tyler are just like sitting in a diner trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And they're looking at these horrible photos that the killer has like sent to, they're like Photoshop photos that he sent to the family of somebody he's taken, trying to taunt them with who the person might have been. It's really sadistic.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like,
that was such an excellent move.
So mean, I know.
And it
and
completely
then so
breaks
like
the person that receives them. They're just like, I don't want to do anything anymore. I just want to die.
yeah. And then
but they still want it. That they still like it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
well,
yeah.
and then like what happened was, like, I'll give you an example of how it works sometimes just in comics in this medium. Like Hayden is such an amazing co-creator, and they're just they have a total license to like story tell however they want. If they think a page should be a different way, and I always like, it makes the process so much more fun because it makes me sort of react to some of the stuff that they do. And it always comes out better for that. And it keeps me young, you know, as a writer, to have to adjust. And so anyway, like that scene was way longer than I had written it, where they kind of were just in a diner and Bodhi and they're not really talking. And then all of a sudden, Tyler realizes they can use these Photoshop photos to kind of track down one of the last steps of this killer. So I was like, what do I do here? What do I do? You know? And I wound up having Bodhi start talking about this thing that Tyler asked and he never answered, about what was his childhood like, to try and take their minds off this case earlier in the issue. And so he has this conversation about how he loved to bird watch, and he had a bird, and it was called this bird called Finn, and how it, you know, would scream when he was outside, when he was away from the room. And it wound up being like a big theme. And then I wrote it into a later issue in a different way too. In issue 5, sort of added a beat or two. And it became one of like not just one of my favorite moments, but I think one of the strongest sort of thematic and emotional touchstones of the book. And that's all just because Hayden drew it longer than I thought, you know? And I think, you know, it's not like the whole book would be different otherwise, but it would have other sort of discoveries, like you said, Patrick, or other kind of moments that I love that, you know, would come out if it had just been executed differently by Hayden. So that's the fun to me, is like when you're confident in the story you're telling, and you can kind of play and experience that kind of the small revelations like that along the way, and be like, oh, I don't know if I love this. I don't know if it works, but I'm going to try it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Scott, you've been surprised by your artist doing something as they are collaborators and storytellers themselves and giving you something that you didn't expect from your own narrative. Patrick, as the writer and illustrator of your own work, do you find that the artist portion also kind of challenges or surprises you as a storyteller, where you've scripted, you've structured your story, and then when you bring pen to paper, you go, no, and start changing things based on just the visual acuity of the story.
Yeah, right. Well, not necessarily. And it's essentially because I don't write. I write and I thumbnail at the exact same time.
Okay.
And so I can't, because I just have such a tough time like just sort of imagining and be like, I don't know how much, like design wise on the spread, what would this look like?
Mhm.
And if I don't already kind of see that, then I'll have to go back and do it again in a certain way and retweak stuff. So just for efficiency's sake, I'll sort of thumbnail everything. So I kind of already have an idea of what's going to happen visually. And that informs the writing. And so that said too, I think, I mean, I'm definitely open as well to writing and having somebody else draw it. And even if I did, I would still do this and not show anything that I thumbnailed, just so I had an idea of like what I was thinking in my head, and then completely let the artist come up with whatever they got, and then let it totally change as needed.
Yeah.
But it's you know, because I am very much open to that collaboration. The most collaboration I get to do is just with lettering. So Hassan Otsman does all the lettering, and he's amazing. And it's he'll put in things that I'm totally not anticipating, and it enhances stuff so much that it's wonderful, and I love that part of it. But yeah, in terms of the art, it's pretty much I kind of already know what's going to happen.
I'm so envious. I wanted to be a comic book artist all through high school. I was like terrible copies of like Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson and all those Image guys at that time.
Oh yeah, me too.
But like, and then I got to college and realized I wasn't good enough. Or and they're also
oh no.
Well, it was like I also fell in love with the writing aspect more.
Yeah,
so I sort of, but it's so, to this day, Jeff Lemire is always like, he sent me twice. He sent me like brushes and things to go back. The idea that just the totality of the vision and the singular sort of the how robust it is, how it feels like one person throughout is so invigorating reading your book. I mean, it's so like seamless. It just feels like it's from just one creative energy.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I would say I would still love to see art from you, but it's I stopped I drew a bunch when I was a kid, and then I got into comics during like the early 90s, so like during Image coming up, and so all that stuff, I was the exact same. Like I would draw whatever wild stormy looking thing, and then I stopped drawing after high school just because I wanted to do movies. And I felt so like I was some kid from Iowa, and I was just like, it's gonna be so hard to make movies unless you just don't do anything but live and breathe movies.
Right.
Which is a dumb idea, but I didn't know. So I just felt like it's like, I'm not gonna bother with drawing or whatever. And then it wasn't until I was like 30, and then I was like, oh yeah, I love drawing. I forgot that I love drawing. And I'd done a couple of little movies at that point, and it takes so long, and I was just like, no, I'll just draw for fun because it's a small thing to do, and I can have an idea and finish it within an hour. I love that. Yeah. And so then that was kind of how that all picked up again.
I was going to ask you if this has already been optioned or any of that stuff too, just because it would make such a fantastic animated, like R-rated.
Yeah,
feature.
I agree. It has not. Nothing's been optioned yet.
Shocking.
I'm working in that space.
Anybody's
like
listening? Give me a call. I mean,
I'm working in that space with witches, with the people that do Invincible and that stuff right now, and
cool.
I honestly, like, that lane is so fun, right? I just feel like it's going to expand further, where we have a whole generation of people like my age, younger, whatever, but that were raised on sort of sophisticated animation, whether it was like anime or Pixar or all of it. But like it was still sort of like partly for kids and this. And then now you're seeing things that are so sophisticated in their and progressive in their visual style and in their storytelling, like Spider-Verse and all these things. And it feels as though it's like on the cusp of really kind of blowing open further about having more animated television shows, more films on streaming and all of that stuff that are R-rated, like for adults. And to me, this would be like, I feel like it would show up in a second for this. I feel like it'd be perfect, so.
Well, I appreciate that.
If I ran Hollywood, I would do it.
It also doesn't hurt that it's a surefire thing. It's like a thing that would definitely catch, as it's catching in the current space. The audience is loving Beneath the Trees, as I hear it constantly. Like we're in this space, so we're going to hear about people who. It's not like I'm going to the grocery store and hear people talk like, "Dude, did you read the latest issue of anything?" But, trust me, in the comic book space, there's a lot of hubbub. But
I feel like if you go over to Japan and or France or something, you'd
overhear conversations about art, certainly, and manga and comics. But I wanted to ask you both. I thought it'd just be kind of fun, since you both are not only contributors to pop culture, but also you absorb it yourselves. Is there any horror fiction today that you are enjoying now, presently, that isn't your own?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's like a golden age right now for horror and comics, where I mean, first and foremost, like my best friend, one of my closest friends, James Tynan, I think is just killing it with Department of Truth and Something is Killing the Children, and now Spectrograph coming out from Distillery. I mean, he's just and The Deviant is also amazing by him. So he's just like a horror machine.
Yeah, juggernaut.
Right? I know. It's just
I just rattled off a bunch of titles, and they're all great.
Like, they're all great. Like he doesn't, and I met him. It was funny because I was like an adjunct teacher and he was an undergrad, and that's how we met. He was my student in like
where at
Sarah Lawrence.
So excellent.
Yeah, and then when I got broke into comics, we just stayed in touch, and he was always incredibly talented. But now, like when your student becomes somebody you learn from, it's like a huge, just a huge thrill. But I would point to him first and foremost as someone but there's so many good series out there, like, Philadelphia and on and on and on. There's like, it's a great moment, I think, for horror and comics.
I agree.
Oh yeah. I also agree with that. And just in general too, in film and also prose stuff. I'm like, the thing that sucks about working on comics is that it takes a long time. So like I have been not able to catch up on reading or watching movies, etc. So I just have like this list of like to be read, to be watched. But then I can listen to audiobooks. And so I have been cruising through a ton of stuff. And there's just a lot of exciting horror stuff coming through in books as well. And I feel like there's something in the air that is allowing folks to evolve the genre in really interesting ways. And it's still like in, following suit from what's come before, but at the same time, like, it's just as the times change and the sort of anxieties of contemporary society change, we have like this new space for, or this, I guess, familiar space of horror to like explore all that, which is really fun. And I think that it's never gonna get old. Not for me anyway. Like, I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it is like I think you're right, like a strangely daring and feels like evolving moment for horror and film and all of it, where you're seeing, there's almost like this, there's always like, fun slasher or whatever, but there's also this like heightened level of dread in a lot of the films, and this kind of pervasive anxiety, this like low frequency, jangling kind of fear throughout, an atmospheric fear. And it feels like it's more of a pervasive kind of, emotional sort of tone of the thing that feels like everyday life these days, where you're like,
See,
there's more,
it
it
is.
just feels interesting.
I mean, to me, I definitely cut my teeth on like a lot of the, 70s, 80s horror filmmaking in terms of being a fan. And that stuff totally, I mean, like you've got a whole Vietnam generation that was just spilling their brains out onto movies. And I feel like that was such a crazy time to have lived through. And much like today feels like such a crazy time that like that it's, it makes sense to me that this would be, it's funny because like I got into horror stuff. I'd always watched it, I guess, just as a movie fan, but then I really keyed in on it in college and even had like a class, that was very much focused on it. And then that really helped me be like, oh my God, there's like so much different stuff that I even knew about. And really helped me appreciate all the different ways that you can explore stuff through horror. Because it's such an experimental medium, like genre, I should say, not medium, but experimental genre that allows for all sorts of stuff and nobody bats an eye.
Right.
Like you can do so much stuff with it and it's all on the table. But at the same time, you're really touching a lot of nerves in some interesting ways and the sort of transgressive ways that I find the most interesting.
I think if you're doing it right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
and
like there's
that's-
stuff Scott in Dungeon that's like so dark that, like in terms of just the the inner workings of the Keep's philosophy.
I know. I really, honestly, there are a couple books like that one and Book of Evil. Like there are a couple books I've done over the last couple of years that I like got uncomfortable writing them, because it was like, it goes really, really dark. And I don't know. It's like a weird space. It's like when I used to write the Joker a lot of the time and you'd write these long things with him. And I know there are a lot of different interpretations, but like the interpretation that we had was really grim, where he was just like mercilessly, punishingly bad. And you're in that headspace for a while and it's like, it's thrilling. And then it just gets like, by the time I was done, I was like, oh, I have to like get out of here.
Yeah.
And that Dungeon and Book of Evil were like that, where I love the stories, but both of them were like, it's like stepping into a dark room, when you do them, and it's hard. Yeah.
One of the
Also,
things
do you find this, Patrick? I find like sometimes I can write things like as dark as I can write like the darkest of the dark for myself, but there's some things like I can't watch, even if like I could write about them like this, like a kid being kidnapped or a kid being taken. And I honestly don't know that I could watch that if I wasn't writing it, just because I have young kids and it's just too much for me. Like the mysteries where a kid dies, and yet I'm always killing kids in my own stuff, and, like, eating them and witches and like throwing them off cliffs and all kinds of murderous actions. But like it's weird. I feel when I'm not in control of it, then I feel really uncomfortable.
I don't know if I don't know if I haven't. I'm pretty much everything's on the table for me to check out. Depending on it, but if there's definitely some movies that like I don't know if you've ever seen Martyrs.
Oh my God.
Martyrs was one that took me a long time to get up the nerve to watch, and it's a rough one.
It's super rough. Actually, like we can have a whole thing about that movie and that whole French wave of horror that you saw them and
Inside,
Inside, exactly. I've seen all those. Like I went through a whole thing. But yes, weirdly, like when I have to list the movies that I really would cite as like horror movies that hit me in not just like a, sort of salacious or gross way, but something that disturbed me and made me think, and maybe it's awful, maybe it's not, but Martyrs was interesting in the way it earned that ending.
It's such a rock solid philosophy of how they got to the end that I'm like, I gotta allow it.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's so punishing.
They stuck the landing. Oh, it's such a hard ride.
Yeah, but it's the when a story. I mean, that's what like I don't know. Tyler is here. Like he has to leave in a second. But my assistant, he's here because we were teaching last night, and he always stays over and that. And I'll be to him like, God, this one is like, I feel like this one's so dark. This ending, and it's like, you just have to be like, sometimes it's like, well, that's where it goes. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's hard.
Yeah.
But I was
Yeah.
saying this
If
to him
you-
just the other day, where I was like, this ending is too dark. And then I'm like, maybe I should change it. Maybe I should call them and be like, what if we put an alternate ending in the trade where it's like, you could see that maybe I'm not, I thought of another one at least. It's not this week, but like, you know, that you can't mitigate it. You have to just like let it be. But I mean, so many of my favorite things, like Night of the Living Dead, you know,
Yeah.
like, just my favorite horror movie ever. It was like the first thing that really, really knocked me back when I was like 10 or 11. And I thought it was going to suck because it was black and white. And I was like, this is so stupid. And I like, we rented it from a place where they would deliver R-rated movies to your house, but they would not rent them to you in the store. This is in New York City. And so like, it was this neighborhood secret. And we were like Sleepaway Camp 2 and all that. And then this. But it was so grim, and like nobody you thought was going to lived. And it took me a while to realize that, and spoiler, but it's like 60 years old. If somebody is like, has you seen it? I'm sorry. But the idea that it took me a while to realize why that was so powerful, that the young couple and the hero, and like nobody makes it out, because it's about our failure in collectivism, even in like the threat of catastrophe or cataclysm or whatever. So that my favorite things, you know, often are like that, you know, that have that grimness, I guess.
I feel like to me, it's like what resonates. And if it's not earned and not resonating, then I check out. And if it does resonate with me and I carry that with me, that's like my goal. If I can have a reader carry something with them that kind of sticks in their head, then that's, you know, that's an achievement.
Yeah. That's what you're describing, being haunted, Patrick.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yes. Very much want to haunt people.
Yeah, absolutely. There is there's an element that I think that you guys are keying into that you both seem to love and also infuse into your horror, and it is the matter-of-factness in your horror protagonist, like your antagonist or protagonist in the case of Samantha, about their existential surrender to the instinct to be monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, well, I am a monster, and that's just how it is, and this is the reality, and the world has to react to that. And of course their reaction is a lot less mundane because what they're doing is monstrous. But I find that's the case in both of them. Both the Keep and Samantha are both kind of like, this is how it is. Like, this is my reality, and I'm imposing it onto actual reality.
Yeah, very much. I feel like to me, I didn't want it to be, a lot of comparisons have come up just in terms of of Beneath the Trees, and like Dexter is like a cultural touchstone of like, what's this about? And it was like, well, you're following a serial killer.
It's an easy shorthand.
But I didn't want to, I hadn't really seen Dexter. I'd seen the first episode. And then when I started putting this together, I purposely avoided it because I didn't want to get too inspired about stuff or whatever. So I did know that he mostly just kills like bad people. It's sort of a way that he was sort of raised to channel this. And I didn't want that to be the case with Samantha, very much on purpose, just because it didn't make sense from, like, if she really wants to, you know, stay hidden, like, it would be make a lot more sense to just be completely random about it. That sort of cold-bloodedness was a very, like, I wanted to make it like as hard as possible to like, you know, Samantha, in terms of how you would, you know, the audience would respond to her, and at the same time be compelled to still follow along for the ride and see how this is going to go, and to see like her thing, whatever the world was that she'd set up for herself, to be in peril. Yeah. And I thought that it's very much like a Norman Bates sort of situation where you're following along with him, and it's like, is he really going to be able to hide this thing or whatever? And so you know, I feel like the matter-of-factness is part of that for sure. Like, it's very, you know, it's just a sort of her everyday existence. And I think there's something about watching somebody being good about doing something.
Everybody likes to watch somebody who's good at something.
Yes. Yeah,
especially
very much.
Serial killers. Well, because they're doing the worst thing. Like, they're doing the worst thing, and you're like, this is a thing that I have been conditioned by culture is something you don't get away with. whether it's morally
Sure.
or legally. And watching that happen and watching them execute it so well. And then, of course, the reveal of Samantha being like, it's been decades that I've been doing this.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
you know, and you're like,
You only
oh,
know about the ones you know about.
exactly. Well, there's that
That's
moment.
the
There's a sequence where
creepiest.
she's putting the ducks into the paint bales, and
And
I'm
you
just
see
like,
all the
right. And I'm like, you're signing it. These are you're gonna get caught. And she's like, it's been like 30 or it's been 20 years, and I'm like, oh,
Right,
never
yeah.
mind. Okay, well, I'll just put that out of my mind again.
I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the also like there's something, sounds awful, but like there's something fascinating about like I think being free from morality, like you know, the idea
Sure.
that somebody doesn't have guilt or compassion or empathy and is just that thing that's like, I feel like I keep writing stories about those characters trying to convince everybody else that this is better. It's like the next evolutionary step in some way of people, that which is horrifying and not true. But I just mean like you see so many of the loudest voices in the room like getting rewarded for being, you know, sociopathic in a lot of ways, or just being completely, you know, uncaring of other people, politically and all that stuff, that you feel as though there's kind of a reward system for being bad sometimes.
Yeah.
And that sense of like, well, what if being good or being moral or ethical is this like vestigial limb or something that's like, who, you know what I mean? It just holds you
Yeah.
back, because think of how wonderful it would be if you didn't care about anybody but yourself. Like,
Right.
and there's something I think alluring to people about following a serial killer the way they do Samantha in your book so well. And I love those stories because there is like a thrill, not to be a killer, but to be free of like you said, Sal, too, like restraint in some ways,
Yeah.
whether it's cultural or it's just
Right.
emotional and psychological, you know?
But it does seem like Patrick is infusing something in his art with Samantha. When you see her, she doesn't seem happy.
No.
You know,
yeah.
like there is this kind of like blasé, dull wash over her eyes that says like either, and it could be any number of things. And I'm not trying to like, Scott and I are both fans. Are both like, oh my god, like we want to kind of just want to read the next chapter. But, and I'm not trying to get to that, but I am saying that like it seems to be that there is either she is bored, looking for some new challenge, or that it doesn't fulfill her like she thought it would, or that it used to. Because you can see her like when she's doing these things, and she's like, yeah, you know, like in the beginning when we see the big duck sequence, it's like, yeah, that we're seeing her doing something really well, and she seems very, you know, this is what centers me. I find myself in a good place, and you know, it calms me down. But like whenever she's you know, when the goat is strung up and everything, her reaction is just this very like kind of unfeeling, unimpressed,
Yeah.
unsurprised.
None of that stuff phases her. Right.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's very much. She's it's like Samantha, the way she sits in Woodbrook is that she is sort of a couple steps ahead of everybody in many regards, but then also because she's sort of amoral in the way she kind of views everything, it's just none of that stuff impacts her in the same way. And I feel like there's a certain there is a dullness to her, right, that she, in terms of an emotional richness, that she doesn't have, just void. And it's more observational, and she knows how to play the part super well, because that's how she's sort of adapted with everything. But it's definitely like, you know, it's more of a curiosity that drives her towards that stuff. And then also, and it is sort of there's a definite fulfilling element to her murdering, because she sort of has that, you know, I mean, it's sort of like she, you know, kind of gets horny for murder, and then it
washes
goes
over
away.
it
goes away when she fulfills it, and then it kind of comes back. And so it's sort of this thing that she sort of dealt with. But even the dealing with it has become, you know, it's
second nature.
Well, it's sort of like smoking or whatever. Like, you know, like, you get that cigarette, and you're like, I'm okay, fine, I can get a buzz, but I don't feel bad. And so, you know, whatever.
Scott, for contrast, and I don't want to tell tales out of school here, but I feel like the motivations of the Keep, going through the motions of producing an entire alternate future for his victims, the Keep deeply cares.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most sadistic sort of psychology I could make up, I think, where he thrives on the actual pain caused by the removal of this person from like the currency of the world. Like, so he loves hurting you by taking something the person you love out of the context of your life and then reminding you they're gone all the time and being hurt somewhere else. Like, so that they're still out there. I was like trying to think of the worst like hell I could put myself in. Like, what would be the worst thing? And it's that not knowing what happened to the person that you love, and then somebody else knows, and they're taunting you. Was like,
yeah. It reminds me of that moment in Minority Report when Tom Cruise's character is talking to the precog, and she gives the whole alternate future for his dead son.
Well, for his dead son, yeah.
And they're so like hugging each other and crying, and you're just like, that's the worst thing you could have told. Like, thank you. Now I know I can concretely say the future of my child was robbed, and it sucks that it's gone. Like, yeah, I just love the idea of the keep being like, yeah, I'm gonna do this crazy thing to this person, and it's gonna be monstrous and horrible, and you know what? I'm not done. Like I killed the person, but I really, how can I make it worse for anybody? Like, yeah, it's just.
What I love is like Samantha's. I mean, I love characters like that. That also people are always saying, well, a villain needs to be sympathetic. The villain needs to be, you have to create somebody that has. And I'm not saying you don't sympathize with her because she's worried about being found out.
Right.
But I mean, I like characters that are just like wholly black on the inside. Like, I think there are people like that in the world, and it just, there's no, they're just, they're just out to cause harm, and that's it. Maybe not in fiction, at least. I love that personality. Like, that, I mean, I love writing it because it's just so nightmarish,
It's super compelling and very fascinating.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we could talk about horror all day. Clearly, I think we've formed a friendship, and now you guys are going to go off and have a conversation about this more, but especially the French impact on modern horror and cinema today. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for having this conversation. Before we go, Patrick, where can the people find you if they want to get more Patrick Horvath?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can always find me at patrickhorvath.com, and that's got you can find my Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff from there.
And Scott,
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and it's the same always. It's just S Snyder and then 1835. It's just Elvis's birthday. I was a big Elvis since I was like a kid.
I have always wondered what 1835 was, and I'll be honest with you, I thought it was like a Civil War reference, like there was something cool battle that took place in 1835 or something. But
no, nothing that cryptic. It's like just or whatever. It's. But anyway, find me there. And again, if anyone like. I can't tell you like how thrilling it is to find, like, I know you're not like new talent in the way that you're not like, a kid coming in, but to find someone new in the comic space that's doing such amazing work. So if you've not picked up Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, like, go do it because it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it.
I love it. It's fantastic.
It is. It's incredibly encouraging to have people like so established as yourself doing like championing this stuff. It's hugely appreciated.
It's great.
And so thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
No, sure.
Well, you got the links, folks. Check them out, and don't forget to pre-order your comics. See you guys next time.